Welcome everyone. My name is Sean, and today I want to talk about what is going on in the small town that is located in the state of Minnesota called GoodHue, Minnesota. Now, I have been told before on this channel multiple times that I am not good at pronouncing Minnesota location names. The famous Adina incident comes to mind, but that being said, we're going to power through because an entire police department has resigned all at the same time, and I get the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this is not due to COVID-19. But before we get into that, this video has a sponsor. Let me toss it to the sponsor, then we'll come back over here, and we'll discuss this whole thing on the other side, real intelligent like. The surging national debt is bullish for the gold market. The recent debt ceiling drama ended with nominal cuts to the federal budget, along with an unlimited credit card for the feds to spend all of your money, spend away your future for years to come. This is why a Bank of America senior analyst said that the current boom that we're seeing is going to be followed by a dramatic drop in stock prices. Are you prepared? Is your retirement prepared for the impending doom? One of the things that you can do to prepare for this is actually move some of your money into precious metals. And with National Gold Group, you can be connected with a world-class customer service to walk you through the process. If you mention my channel's name, you will have the fees waived when you decide to invest with National Gold Group, and you can call them at 866-826-2603 in order to be walked through your options. They have best-in-class customer service, great representatives that are American-based. So once again, call them up at 866-826-2603, and remember, there's always a risk for investing, and past performance is not necessarily a guarantee of future results. So the first thing that we need to understand before we get into this story is the fact that GoodHue, the town in question, is actually a very small town. Its estimated population is around 1,200 people, so you're going to see a lot of people reporting that this whole police department ultimately ended up leaving, but I need you to understand that it's like 8 people. Not like 8 people, but actually 8 people. 7 officers and 1 police chief. And one of the reasons why they're leaving, beyond the fact that there's a general sentiment among officers across the country that they're underappreciated, is because these officers actually feel like they're underpaid. On top of that, with recruiting pools decimated, there seems to be no way to replenish these 7 officers in this small town. And to be clear, just because they're a town of 1,200 does not mean that they don't have the whole state, presumably, to pull from in order to find new recruits. In fact, one of the things that I found incredibly interesting, and likely is the reason behind the frustration.
Like I said, this has been 3 weeks now. We got 0 applicants, and I have 0 prospects. I've called every PD around. For the youngest guys out there getting into the game, there's nobody getting into the game.
Is that the police chief was doing just that. Apparently, this is a tactic that they use where they reach out to bigger cities in and around the area and ask them for young officers, maybe people who just didn't make the cut, in order to bolster their ranks. But even with this tactic of using the training and the rookie officers of other places did not work. Even trying to supplement with maybe people who wouldn't make the cut in the big city did not help. They were not able to find any new recruits, so on a Monday evening, all of the officers and the police chief issued a resignation. Now, the town of GoodHue has tried in order to get them to stay. They actually increased the police chief's salary by $13,000. They increased the pay of the individual officers by 5%, but it's just not enough in order to keep them going. So by August 24th of this year, it's over for this town. By August 24th of this year, they will have 0 police officers walking the beat, at least those who work for the city or the town of GoodHue.
After next week, the small city of GoodHue will no longer have a police department after the entire force announced it is resigning.
This comes just weeks after the police chief told the city council that offering $22 an hour would not get any new recruits to walk through the door.
Now, as you can see from the local news segment, the police chief told them that they're not paying the officers nearly enough money in order to compensate for it. The 5% increase appears to be in and around $22 an hour, which might be a good salary or a good hourly rate for a lot of people in this country, but with minimum wage creeping ever closer to the progressive goal of $15 an hour. To me, it doesn't make all that much sense to be a police officer in the state of Minnesota where they just convicted Tao of essentially doing crowd control. I understand that they convicted him in conjunction with the George Floyd incident, but if you were going to say somebody should be not held liable if you buy into the conviction of Chauvin and all these other folks, it would likely be Tao for just trying to control the crowd, yet he ended up serving, or he's going to end up serving, 4 years and 9 months for his role in that incident. So would you put your life on the line? Would you subject yourself to the scrutiny of an attorney general like Keith Ellison for only $22 an hour? Now, I will also give the caveat that a small town of 1,200 people, likely not that dangerous of a job in comparison to being a police officer in the city of Minneapolis, which of course has seen spikes in homicide to, I believe, all-time records, but definitely 1990s levels. And as you can see, this reduction, or the cut in pay in against inflation, because it's not really a reduction, it's an increase, is just not serving the goal. And a bunch of these officers left for other police forces. I believe that the police chief himself, even after a $13,000 raise, ended up moving on to a different police force. And now we're in a crazy situation where they don't have their own police department. What once existed is now gone, and we should see whether or not they can fulfill this with social workers.
The entire police force resigned here in GoodHue. That's the chief, an officer, and 5 part-time officers. City officials are now asking, how do they move forward?
Sorry for my misspeak earlier. I thought it was 8 people because it said 7 resignations, and then it said the chief resigned, and I thought the chief was a separate person. But just think about the structure of this police force, and you can obviously understand that they're destined for disaster. 1, they can't recruit anybody. The salary of $22 an hour, definitely not worth it. 2, they only really have 2 full-time staff. They have the police chief, and then they have 1 officer, and then they have 5 part-time officers running this police force. And again, GoodHue, small town, likely not a hotbed of criminality, but I think the reason why they don't have full-time officers is because their police budget is only $375,000, which again, spread out over 1,200 people, could be considered a significant amount of money, but if you can't even employ the officers that you have full time, they have to work other jobs, there is no way that you're actually going to be able to maintain a police force. Now, I don't know what the perfect number is in order to pay police officers in order to stay on the force in this country. And in fact, we have an example in Washington, D.C., where they rose the pay of officers, they doubled their spending on recruitment, and recruiting continued to go down. So this is a national issue where people are just not being drawn to the profession, even for better pay in big urban areas. But obviously, not paying your officers a full-time salary has disastrous implications. What are you to do if you're a cop other than moonlight if you can't work full-time? And again, moonlighting can lead to conflicts of interest, because if you end up working another job in and around the community, you might be tied to somebody who potentially might have a criminal issue somewhere down the line, and that creates a conflict for you as an officer.
It was standing room only Monday night at GoodHue City Hall as officials discussed the 7 resignation letters they were handed last week.
I think we're all a little bit blindsided by it, but we're resilient, and we're going to move forward. But it is hard.
Mayor Ellen Anderson Buck says Police Chief Josh Smith and his officers will be employed until August 24th. Then after that, their cases will be handed off to the GoodHue County Sheriff's Office.
I want to reiterate that we will have police coverage in the city of GoodHue. That is not an issue.
So I just want to straighten some things out so people can understand that she is downplaying the issue, but it's not going to be anarchy in the streets because of these officers that are resigning. Because obviously, if most of them were working part-time in the first place, chances are they weren't having this giant impact, even though, again, I need to emphasize that the town is uniquely small. However, supplementing with the sheriff's department is going to have its own problems. First and foremost, if you didn't like the fact that people weren't going to want to work for $22 an hour, you're definitely not going to like the fact that the sheriff's department is going to have to be paying overtime in order to compensate for the increased workload now that the police department happens to be gone. On top of that, sheriff's departments actually have different duties than your standard police department. First of all, they answer to their own elected official, the elected sheriff. Secondly, they're supposed to go after bail jumpers and other people who are fugitives from the law and don't typically, all the time, enforce the day-to-day interactions in terms of regular police encounters. On top of that, they're in charge of the jail system. So if you're diverting money from the GoodHue Sheriff's Department in order to cover what was once covered by the GoodHue Police Department, you're going to end up paying more in overtime, and you're going to end up with issues like the fact that you might have to compensate by reducing what you need in terms of your jailing system. Now again, I'm not expecting a small town like GoodHue to have significant criminal justice related problems, 1,200 people, as I've said multiple different times throughout the course of this video. However, this is a microcosm of a problem that we're seeing across this country, and what I said before is definitely true, which is with these bigger departments that are losing recruits and they're having to get more and more desperate in order to draw people in, your small town departments are just going to end up losing and hemorrhaging their police force because they just can't compete with the overall budget. So even though this is an issue for the small town of GoodHue, make no mistake, it is also closely related to the issues that larger police departments are having across the country. If you're the Minneapolis Police Department, you have a devastating problem with recruiting. Crime is shooting up dramatically. The George Floyd effect, of course, is going to have its epicenter where George Floyd happened, and you're going to have to compensate. And a big city can often raise taxes, or at least spend more on public safety in a way that these small towns just cannot. Now, I don't know who exactly, no matter what they were paying, would want to work for the Minneapolis Police Department, but it is also true that other cities, other towns in the area are raising pay for officers in order to deal with their own recruiting shortfall. Not to mention, out-of-state police agencies are trying to lure in talented people. So again, if you're in a small town and you have to deal with the fact that the majority of your police department is part-time, it might not be something that is completely at the fault of the mayor of your small town. There might be factors external that are contributing to the fact that your police department is losing steam.
The chief told the council small towns like GoodHue are losing recruits to the cities, and he himself had multiple offers that week alone.
If you want to keep the PD, and this is something where we want to continue going with, something that needs to change dramatically and drastically, and it's got to happen now.
So as I said earlier, and you just heard it from the man himself, he's trying everything as the police chief to bolster recruits, but the fact of the matter is, it's just not happening. And, of course, it gets worse because he's being lured away by a bunch of other big cities that are offering more money, and that ultimately ended up leading to him taking one of those positions. And the thing is, he gave them fair warning. The thing is, their resignations came with the 2 weeks notice. He went to the city council. He did everything that you would want to do in order to make sure that he could stay. But ultimately, why would you stay if you're being significantly underpaid and you could transfer to an area where that salary is going to meet your expectations?
City officials now recognize that if they're going to be able to rebuild, they'll need to be competitive.
I can probably speak for everybody that, they provided excellent safety and security to our community. And the small town policing that they did, we want that back.
Well, it's really nice of the city council person after the fact to say how much he appreciates the officers, but obviously you had to do something when you got the warnings. Maybe they didn't take them that seriously, but the way that this news segment ends, I find quite troubling based on how confident the mayor was that they were not going to lose police coverage earlier, because it seems like she didn't verify her sources before making that claim.
The mayor is set to meet with the sheriff on Wednesday of this week to discuss options as far as police coverage goes in the city.
Look, I understand that you can't just say, we're not going to have a police department, fend for yourself, buy your weapons, buy your gold, buy your survival food, because it's essentially the purge in the town of GoodHue. But why are you telling me that you have everything covered with the sheriff, and then at the end of the segment it says the mayor's going to meet with the sheriff to determine how coverage is going to work, because this is obviously not something that has been worked out. Again, I don't want to go too hard on the town of GoodHue. They have their own issues and limitations, likely due to the size of their town. They have to prioritize this versus that in a way that big cities don't seem to have to, and that has led them to be vulnerable to shocks in the market in terms of policing. So there's a shortage of officers, a shortage of recruits due to the George Floyd effect. Maybe they all resigned, like Sam Cedar said, because they're scared of COVID, but I disagree. I think that's a little ridiculous. I think that's a dumb assertion, and that is putting upward pressure on wages in order to compensate. So anybody who does want to get into policing, which is a very small group of people, has no interest in a small town like GoodHue. Now look, I hope everything works out for these people. I know a lot of people like to say, well, you voted for it, so you deserve it, but I'm assuming that in the purplish state that Minnesota actually is, that small towns of about 1,200 people are likely people who voted conservative and likely would not want to deal with the issues of losing their police force had they been able to avoid it. They just don't have the funds to match it, and this is going to be a situation that small town after small town is going to be desperately impacted with as big cities try to compensate for the crime increase due to the fact that they lost so many officers. But you know, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the town of GoodHue. Till next time.